Call the regular board meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. And first item of business is setting the agenda. The only thing I thought I noticed was there was intended to be an item 8E on the Shields Lake reuse stabilization. And I thought that Emily and I had talked about that, and I thought she referenced it in her email that there would be an item 8E. But there's a separate contract to be let for that one, right?
Correct.
Okay. So,
Mr.
go ahead.
Mr. President, we do have
Yeah, I saw that, but it didn't show up on the agenda. That's the
Oh.
only thing. I saw that.
to be added.
Yeah. So there's an 8B for the alum treatment contract award, but then when Emily and I talked, she was planning to add an 8E for this particular item, the stabilization.
She didn't want to update the agenda one more time.
Oh, it's all right, we can add it.
I would just make a recommendation that we dispense with the district anniversary presentation, since we don't have any audience, really.
You want to see the presentation? All right, that's a good idea. All right. Sorry for all those who put it together. We'll reuse it sometime.
I don't think there was much
Okay.
to it,
Okay.
honestly.
All right. Any other changes or additions to the agenda?
You want to cover that with comments or just a little more?
Well, okay. I was going to do it under the managers, but just so
Okay,
there's
okay.
transparency. I'm not going to be able to be at the One Watershed, One Plan meeting on Monday, and there's a big decision coming, and so I think we should maybe talk about that
Okay.
tonight, either under old business or under reports of managers.
Okay. Should we just add it as item D under old business? And make sure we get it covered then. Okay. Anything else? All right, we need a motion.
I move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. We have the consent agenda, the regular board meeting minutes from August 8th and August 22nd. If there are no issues?
I do have some issues, but I'm not going to hold up the consent agenda. I'll talk to staff about it afterwards.
Okay. All right, we need a motion to
I'll move the
approve.
consent agenda.
Motion's been made,
I'll second.
seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public open forum. All right. Move on to the Citizens Advisory Committee update. Jessica.
Mr. President, managers. At the last CAC meeting, the committee members started to pick their individual roles. If we remember that roles and responsibilities document that they adopted, each member started going through and picking which roles they're most interested in. They also talked a little bit about the Jeffers Foundation and the meetings that Kurt and Mike have been having with that foundation. And then as well as the DIY monitoring program. Tom Fury talked with the CAC a little bit about what he's learned about the DIY monitoring program, and two other committee members expressed their interest in being involved as well.
Any questions for Jessica? All right.
Is the CAC meeting in October, or has it gone to a quarterly meeting?
No,
schedule?
it's October 1st.
Okay.
That's the one you were planning to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jessica. Aquatic invasive species update.
President managers. So an amendment to the existing PLM contract has been accepted to include a non-native Phragmites treatment, specifically the one near Bone Lake. Treatment dates will be provided by PLM hopefully tomorrow. Should get an answer back. On September 19th, I co-hosted an aquatic plant booth at the Chisago County Children's Water Festival that taught the students the difference between native and non-native plants. The event went well, and I would estimate that we probably had over 150 students at our booth alone. So, good event. On September 21st, same day as the district tour, as you saw, we had the local fishermen and WSB attempt the first carp removal treatment on Shields Lake of the year. But due to wet weather and the poor condition of the access road, their truck and trailer got stuck and removal was canceled. Mike and I have worked on locating a contractor, and we'll have someone out tomorrow to lay down some gravel on the road and improve the shoreline to make it more accessible for both the carp removal and the alum treatment. So, and then we should, after those upgrades are made to the access, WSB and the local fishermen will be back out on this Saturday. On September 23rd, the DNR and Matt Downing from WCD, along with myself and one other staff member, went out for one last survey of Bone Lake for zebra mussels. We did not find anything during our surveys. The DNR also did 2 more veliger toes, I believe, and we'll have a report on that with the results later this year. A flowering rush treatment assessment is anticipated for September 31st. The results of this assessment will determine if a third treatment is necessary. I believe Steve McComas doesn't think we'll need one, but he'll be out there Monday to make that assessment. On Tuesday, September 24th, I attended the Bone Lake Association meeting and provided some general AIS updates. I also gave the members present a flyer on how to check their water equipment for zebra mussels as they remove their docks, boat lifts, and watercrafts from the lake this year. I also offered to any interested members present that I can come out and inspect their equipment for them. That way, yeah, we can check more equipment all around the lake and hopefully not find anything. The watercraft inspection program. So I have calculated the hours that have been worked up until September 7th. And as of that time, so a couple weeks ago, Bone Lake and Comfort Lake had met their goals for hours, 500 and 525 hours respectively. Forest Lake was last calculated to have been over 80% of the way to its goal of 2,700 hours. Currently, the district has 1 remaining inspector, unfortunately, but Chisago has been kind enough to station 3 inspectors and put an emphasis on Forest Lake through the remainder of the season to help us get to that 2,700 hours for our goal. And a full report will be made available later this year on that program.
Questions?
Yes,
Jackie?
I just have one question on Bone Lake, the zebra mussels. You said that there hasn't been any sightings since that first one. That's not listed in your report. So is that a reportable finding?
Yes.
Okay.
In the admin update, you mean? Did not list that?
No.
Oh. I can definitely make that inclusion.
Yeah, I think it's important because this is a very unusual situation where 6 were found. Treatment was taken and performed, and we have no evidence of zebra mussels in that lake. So either a mistake was made at the beginning, or we have found a way to eradicate this, which is pretty amazing. I'd like to know which one it is, because if it's the latter, we should really be publishing this.
Well, it is the same technique that they used in other lakes, so.
But have they eliminated zebra mussels in other lakes
No.
using that treatment?
Right.
No.
There were other factors that Steve McComas noticed that were unusual with his finding. But we can maybe do something more in detail at a later time on that.
Okay.
Yes, I can certainly make an inclusion that we have not yet found anything. I don't know that I'd feel confident to say that we eradicated at this point, just because it has been so early and it's a needle in a haystack sort of survey. But I agree, I will make that inclusion, so.
Okay, thank you.
And you mentioned the DNR did a villager survey on the lake, so they drag something behind the boat to see if they can capture any?
Yeah, it's basically a fine mesh net
Yeah.
sock that they tow behind the boat. I believe they did one during the initial survey at some point, I can't remember the actual date. And they brought it back to the lab for analysis, and they found like 2 veligers, which is not enough to conclusively say that there's a reproductive population in the lake. That could just be, you know, dead veligers fell off the boat that entered the lake, especially with the close proximity to Forest Lake. It's probably quite likely that there is some floating around. So there's a certain threshold that has to be met.
Right.
And hopefully when that report comes later this year, we will be well below that threshold.
Good. Okay, good. Anything else on the AIS report? Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.
All right, new business. We have permit 19-027, the A1 mini storage.
Mr. President and managers, before you, you have permit application 19-027. This is the A1 mini storage located in Wyoming. If you recall, we actually had a permit for this site several years ago, and that project never moved forward at that time, so that permit had since expired, and so they're now submitting a new permit, and the layout is also different than the previous submittal. So just a little background on that. But basically they're proposing 4 new mini storage units and associated drives with that. So basically creating additional 0.7 acres of impervious, and if you include the reconstructed, where did I have it? It was 0.9 acres essentially of reconstructed and new impervious. And under our rules, that's what they're required to treat, is that new and reconstructed impervious. The required treatment volume is 5,500 cubic feet. They're providing 6,400 cubic feet in the biofiltration features, thereby meeting that standard. They're also meeting the rate control standard and in fact reducing the rates leaving that site. The low floors on those units meet the district freeboard requirements, and they've also submitted a detailed erosion control plan. So with that, my recommendation is conditional approval, or approval pending receipt of the following, the maintenance agreement, and then also the financial assurances.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because I thought this was a second request coming in and within a year. And I know it just changed hands. There's a new name on the property.
Yep.
But I just had a question about spring runoff on that property. I know according to this, it's going to meet all of our requirements, but the prior owner was clearing the parking lots by dumping all that snow in the county line ditch. And it's a storm water conveyance device. And so what can we do about that? There's no mention of that here, but every winter, big piles of snow were just pushed right into that ditch right there, almost closing it off, really. But it's very overgrown, and we don't want them doing that, obviously. So is there anything in our rules that can stop that from happening, or do we have to talk with the city of Wyoming?
Chuck can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that there's any rules regarding snow storage. There may be something in the maintenance agreement that speaks to that.
Wouldn't that be considered a violation of treating your stormwater on site? I mean, if you're taking all of the accumulation from the winter and pushing it into a ditch, that's not processing it on site.
So the ditch to the south?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we could talk to the city about. I don't know if that small area in the middle there could be, they could direct more of the snow to that area.
Well, that's not really our problem. That's their problem to solve. But my point is that we can't be allowing people to push that much snow. I have pictures on my phone if you'd like to see them afterwards, but this has been an ongoing problem. And I thought it would be corrected through, giving an additional permit here. We might not have caught it at the last time when they expanded, but they didn't expand. The permit went without being acted upon. So now's the time to look at this if we can.
Yeah, I think we could talk to the city and see what sort of ordinances they have regarding snow removal and disposal.
I would just note that the county and thus the city line is on the southern edge there, so I think we established previously that Washington, or that it's a part of the Forest Lakes conveyance system, but it's city of Wyoming to the north where the storage units are located.
So the line is right there along their property.
That is the county line, yes.
Correct.
Great. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the city of Forest Lake may have an interest in them not doing that. So we could talk to the two cities and discuss the matter.
I mean, in general, this seems like a question that would apply to a lot of different situations, not just this one. I mean, what's the normal way to handle? I mean, we used to have this problem with Gone, right? Dumping stuff right in the Forest Lake channel, right at the outlet of the. So this is not new.
I don't think they're doing that anymore. I think the city did
No, I
it
know,
after them,
but it's happened before, and probably people just move the snow to the most convenient location and leave it there if they can.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is not that it has happened in the past. Clearly it has. But should it continue to happen? Because now we're talking about expanding that permeable, or excuse me, the impervious surface. And so anything that's collecting on that surface is going to go into that ditch system and downstream.
That's
So,
not my question. My question is, do our rules prevent this? They don't appear to.
well, that's what I asked. That was exactly my question.
I don't
is
think
that
the rules stop it,
if-
right?
Our rules don't specifically address snow removal, no.
It might be considered stormwater, but I don't think we've written it that way. So I don't know if we're standing on solid ground, even if we said we wouldn't allow it.
Well, I think Mike said we would talk to the cities about
yeah,
it
that'd be
because
great.
it's clearly something that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying it should happen. I just don't know what ground we have to stand on. And maybe we should be thinking about that as we update the rules. Yeah, Mike?
Mr. President, managers, I think this staff could also reach out to MPCA to see where they are. You know, just from a stormwater management side, this obviously is a much larger issue beyond Comfort Lake, Forest Lake boundaries. And of course, one of our main concerns is the chloride accumulation. So,
Right. Yep,
so we could do that as well.
yep. All right. So does that affect our approval of this permit? Doesn't sound like it.
I don't believe so. I mean, you could surely have a separate motion or add some stipulation that we follow up with the cities and at least have a discussion with the landowner.
Okay.
And maybe it's just more of an education type thing too. The landowner knows that it's a problem.
Yeah.
It just falls under board direction, my recommendation.
Under board direction?
Great.
Yeah, just have the staff work with the.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions about the permit itself? All right, we need a motion to approve it, if we're gonna approve it.
I'll move that we approve permit application number 19027.
Second? We have a second motion. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just noting that the motion is to approve with the engineer's recommended conditions.
Right.
With the engineer's recommendation on additional documentation required
And the financial assurance.
and the financial
Yes.
assurance payments.
Second.
Okay. Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Shields Lake alum treatment, contract award.
President and managers, last Friday, district held an open house, or excuse me, a bid opening for, getting our events mixed up here. Bid opening for the Shields Lake alum treatment. District engineer, Dr. Funky, was present. And so from that, we have reviewed the submitted items and prepared documents for the board to review and approve.
So-
Dr. Funk, if you want to go.
Yeah, Mr. President, managers. So we received 2 bids from Clark and HAB. Both were responsive. I have a table of the summary of the total bids. So HAB was the low responsive bidder, so it's our recommendation to award the contract to HAB. They also are under contract for the second phase of the Moody alum treatment, scheduled to start October 21st. They are aware of the results that were available on the district website, so in lieu of kind of being the end of the season, would be ready to begin working through the contract documents and getting mobilized in October as well, upon board approval.
Okay. Any questions for Megan? All right.
I'll move to adopt resolution 190903.
All right. You have a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Roll call vote. John Spence, aye. Jackie Anderson.
Aye.
Wayne Moe, absent. Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Jen Oaknick.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. All right, next item is the Bone Lake Legacy Loading Investigation Scope of Work.
Mr. President, managers, so part of our adaptive management, of course, is continually look at opportunities that arise. We had previously, through our diagnostic work, identified this northeast area as a more concentrated area, though the flow was not high due to its drainage area. Last August, I think it was, property owner out in that area had asked me to come out, take a look, and there was still a lot of plant growth coming right outside where the drainage area is. And in conversation with this person who had been there, longtime Bone Lake resident and such, had noted to me that there was a former dairy operation, which then going back and look at the aerial photos, you can see the cows standing on the edge of the wetland. So we've done some more diagnostic work just to verify that work, and then I asked the EOR to put together the scope.
President managers, I don't know if there's any questions on it, but basically it's just for EOR staff to go out to the wetland, collect samples similar to what we did in the Moody wetland system, just to get a sense of if there is accumulated phosphorus and to what extent. It will be iterative. We'd collect all the cores, but only analyze a few samples at first. And then if we find higher phosphorus results, then we'd submit the full suite of samples. So that's the cost is up to the 5511 or 5,111, but a lot of that is the lab expenses, and that would be variable.
I'll move to authorize the administrator on the advice of council to enter into an agreement with EOR in accordance with the September 17th, 2019 scope of work and an amount not to exceed 5,111.
All right.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion Motion carries. All right. Gallagher Classification and Compensation Study Proposal.
President managers, last December, so November, December, I was asked to provide information to another study done by several watershed districts through this firm. They completed their report and provided a summary to me. I conferred with the other administrators regarding the value and process that they went through with this particular firm. And as we know, our current salary study is at the end of its term, at least have done, and it has been, at least by observation and comments from the board, somewhat limiting in its scope. And so this was an opportunity then to look at perhaps a different summary and approach to that, but still get us the information we're looking, but maybe more accurately reflect the work being performed by the various staff members. They offer us several options within the scope, and I did ask if they were available to attend this evening. They were not due to other commitments, but if there are any other questions, I can get back to them.
So I guess when I read it, my question was about the classification work, part of the work plan, and the job evaluation part of the work plan. And what those entail and the value that you see to what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, I was not able to view any of the details of the reports for the others, but I think that based on at least my communications, these are other metro watershed districts. They felt that these were a good value, I guess, and well worth the investment for their entities. And so, and the one South Washington is continuing to have additional services performed, and then Capital Region Watershed District is having the firm conduct sort of an HR review of all their sort of compliance review of all their forms and documents, et cetera.
There's no price on this report. But
It's on this guy.
where is
It's
it?
on the back.
Yeah, it's.
There it is, that's right, the table.
Yeah. And I was just surprised about the two optional parts. It seemed like,
I guess one thing that bothers me, whenever you have a study done like this, there should be some discussion of sample size. Are we going to talk to one watershed? Are we going to talk to 15? There's no mention of how much work they're going to do for us. In terms of the action, that's going to be the most valuable portion of it. The rest is secondary information. And I guess we should know what the size of the study is going to be. You know, when you looked at the other lady that we had, Noah, whatever it was, she had a complete outline of all the different cities she talked to and et cetera, et cetera. And so this bothers me that we would pay for something that we don't know actually what we're getting in terms of accuracy and size of sample. The bigger the sample, the better, the more accurate it will be for us. So I guess that would be one thing I would suggest that we try to get from them, Mike, if we could.
Well, I think this is a good idea. I do. And it's interesting to have other cities and so forth information, but I'm not so sure that it's relevant to exactly what we're doing. The closest, I think, is probably the environmental services at a county level, where they're doing some of that technical work. But every district is different in how they use their staff. And I think that's been the problem that we've discussed over the years, is that we don't have our staff aligned quite the same way that other districts do. I think what's interesting to me, what would be interesting is, I believe that those three metro watersheds had engaged Gallagher to do a metro assessment, is that correct, Mike?
Correct, and then there were 10 organizations that participated in that.
So to me, that's, as good a relevancy as I need to justify it, because those are similar organizations to ours. The WMOs, I don't think are going to have a lot of relevance, it's just the districts. But again, if we compare ourselves to other districts, you have to really understand what it is that they're doing. Capital Region, for example, has their own in-house lab services, so they're doing a lot of technical.
Right.
And we're not doing that.
I'm not
so-
against this, I'm just suggesting we actually
Yeah.
understand what we're getting. Are we getting 10 watersheds? That's great for that price. Are we getting 2 watersheds?
Yeah.
Well, they just haven't listed it. I think that's unusual that they don't talk
Yeah.
about the sample size, because research is all about sample size.
Yeah, the only mention is that they'll collect data from comparable organizations, and that they'll select those organizations in collaboration with the district, but that doesn't say how many,
No.
right?
Right.
But we know there's at least 12 that they could pick from that are in the metro, and there's probably others, right? The ones that they used in that other survey. So they have data, it's just different.
Well, I think we can clarify that.
Yeah, that's
is
all I'm
what
asking.
What we're
Right.
asking for, but I believe that what's going to happen is those things aren't going to be exact matches, but they're going to have some relevance in some broad comparability. But it depends upon how each job is structured for each district and what that person is responsible for. So that has value here. Whether we're like another district or not is not as important. It's what are our people doing in each of the job classifications, and how does that fit in with that kind of hybrid? They're going to have to look at how our job description for job A compares with another district's, and it might be a combination of two things. And so that's where I think their research is going to be helpful.
I hope it's honed in.
Mike's got a question.
Mike?
Well, I was just noting that coming up in a couple of weeks, I will have a statewide administrators meeting, and I could, in advance of that, maybe ask this to be on the agenda, and then also see if there's others that are interested in being party to a larger study.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that, see if they want to pitch in, because we could perhaps pay more and get a little bit bigger sample and get a better result. But I think they should be interested in sharing it with us. At least if there's 10 of them. Why would everybody do their own? I mean, they've got certain things they want to know on their own, that's fine, but I mean, as far as a standard salary survey, if we went together every year, that would be, or every 2 years, it would be very, very helpful and not that expensive, so. That'd be great if you could do that, Mike.
Well, and I wouldn't want to lose the aspect of collaborating with these people directly to get what we want.
No.
So that doesn't go away.
No,
We're
but
still
we-
going to do that.
And we would just share the
Right.
generalized data, the tables that they come up with.
That's fine. So we're approving this work cost schedule for our purposes.
And the other question is, do we want to they're going to get out the salary structure and the ranges, I suspect. Are they also going to get at what the increases were for last year? So we can see what people did? And have that itemized as an average and, spread and so forth? I don't see that in here anywhere.
It's not
Yeah,
just-
whether or not, I just received a summary table, what their full reports included, I don't know. No one offered to send it to me. They're sometimes reluctant since they paid for it, but whether another board member asks another board member, I guess that'd be one thing. But it does seem just overall that we would work on these more collaboratively across all of our watershed district boundaries.
And again, it would be nice if MOD, since we have a direct representative of MOD now, that if we could maybe get them to,
I brought it up.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that there's been a lot of appetite for doing, but, because the budget's very tight, but we could always do a rider, that's what I always say. If there's interest, well, if there's interest.
Yeah,
I mean, if
exactly.
people are willing to pony up some additional monies for
We'll pay
this,
for it.
then why not?
Have them organized.
And I think there has to be a distinction, though, between the metro and the outstate, because it is different.
Very different.
And typically very one or two person type offices. So
Right.
it's very, very different.
It's very, yeah, this would have to be more of the metro type data, so, yeah.
So I think we'd have more luck, is my point, is that if we had a separate study for each, then the outstate watersheds would be more likely to contribute to that.
Sure.
And then the metro would be separate.
Right.
The only other question I had was that the report would be presented via teleconference, which means they wouldn't come out and personally present it. I guess that seems kind of strange to me. I mean, they're here in town, aren't they, Mike? Aren't they in Minneapolis? It's not like.
Well, they're a large they're a large national firm with international offices as well. But they do have a Minneapolis office, yes.
Saves us a lot of money. You know?
If they travel from New
Yeah.
York, yes, I agree.
Well, even
From Minneapolis.
even from Minneapolis.
Okay.
So especially with the highway system the way it is these days, and the delays, it takes twice as long to get anywhere. But I'm not opposed to that. I'm getting pretty comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's getting easier and easier.
Yeah.
When it works.
Yeah.
All right, so do we have the appetite to approve this then?
I'll make a motion to authorize the administrator, on advice of council, to enter into an agreement with A.J. Gallagher in accordance with the September 19th, 2019 classification and compensation study proposal in an amount not to exceed, and I would say the aggregate of the items on the back, which is $13,200.
With the intent of trying to collaborate with other watersheds on the cost? Do you want to add that? Or some-
Well,
Mike can
I
do
thought that,
also.
isn't that implicit in this document?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely gonna use comparable organizations, so. Now, those are comparable organizations might wanna get in on the bandwagon.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
that's up to them.
Yeah, but
So
Mike's
we're
going to ask them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that can go under staff direction, right? That you'll work with the other watersheds. So we have a motion. We have a second.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Go forth and collect data. All right, the Shields Lake Reuse Project, the Forest Hills Bank Stabilization.
Mr. President, managers, you will recall on the tour, we discussed this a little bit, but also over the course of the last number of months, on occasion, we've brought this up, that this is an item that still needs to be repaired. And so present this evening is Kyle Crawford with EOR. So he's been the principal lead for EOR from a construction project management side, and has been out there on many occasions. And I've walked the site there with him and the property owners as well. In short, the area to the very west, or to the south, failed during the spring thaw runoff period and was stabilized temporarily, and then we need to come back and come on some kind of solution which EOR has put together. They contacted the original contractor. They came up, as noted in the memo, excessively high. So upon discussion with council, we went out for some additional quotes and received one. So, because if there are any particular questions for Kyle, he's available to answer those as well.
Was this part of the original contract? Or is this something that came up after because of issues?
The latter,
Okay.
so. Mhm.
The severe conditions that were cited in the memo were precipitation, higher than normal, or what? Other things?
No, that's correct. The spring runoff, the melt, and the associated then rainfall during, I think, the March, April timeframe, as I recall, has been of historic nature. But more problematic was the fact that we don't control the private property on the other side. They have a culvert there that it's not the proper elevation, but it was the main focus area. But what transpired really was that it froze up and then the water had to find a path and it went around and then out into a flatter area east of where we had formed a drainage area, and then it just cut its own path to the pond. So, yeah, and there was really no means to get back there and try to remedy it any time during those conditions, given all the conditions of the dirt, how soft it was from construction and moving. So, well, I can let Kyle describe maybe some of the proposed engineering solutions, but it definitely is a more permanent solution, so.
Yeah. Do you think this is, what we're proposing is gonna prevent it from happening in the future like this, or reduce the impact?
Yes, we do. We obviously know it is it's not an insignificant number. But however, we do want to make sure that we are having a solution that is a long-term solution and not something we need to come back and fix in 5 years.
So if that culvert freezes up again and we have another deluge,
So the way we've designed it, we're essentially stabilizing 75 to 80 feet of the property line, not just at the culvert.
So the water would have to go farther.
Yeah, we're adding more of a hard armoring solution, channelizing the water to one stabilized, channelized rock channel down to the pond.
Great.
Is this still within our project budget?
It is, yes.
yep.
Does this seem like a good quote? Because I'm thinking back on stuff we had from Peterson to remove sediment out of ponds and all the volume they took out of there. It just seems like it's a high number just for regrading.
It is slightly higher than our engineer's estimate. Our engineer's estimate was, I believe, 89,500, so it is 6% higher than our engineer's estimate. But due to the timing, we do feel it is worth a slightly higher cost to get it done and have it stabilized before winter.
Before winter.
Mr. President, maybe Kyle just go into a little bit of what that hard armoring is, because it's not just a little bit of
Yep.
rock, it's sheet piling on it.
Sheet pile. yeah.
So the way we're looking at it, obviously with weather conditions now, we can't just plan for a normal winter. The last winter we had was obviously very heavy snowfalls and a very quick melt. So what we're looking at doing, we're looking at stabilizing, as I said, about 60 to 70 feet along the property line with a rock swale, directing it'd be to the west along the fence line and then into a much larger rock line swale, which would lead all the way down to the pond. Obviously, there's still a concern with how wet that area is of undercutting, so we are going to be installing shallow sheet piling on it'd be the north side of that riprap, just to ensure that there's no undercutting and we don't lose that bank and lose all the rock that we would put in.
Can you speak to the adjacent private property, the pond on that adjacent private property that discharged sediment into the?
So the
pond
sediment,
itself?
so there wasn't actually sediment coming from the private property.
Okay.
So when the pond on the private property backed up, as Mike had mentioned, it essentially went both ways along the property line and filtered down and cut into the bank within the golf course property.
Okay, so this sentence is incorrect in the beginning?
I believe that, yeah, it might be
Okay.
misinterpreted there.
Manager Anderson, I think there's so many nouns in that sense, but the erosion of the bank is what discharged the sediment, but there's just so many,
Yeah.
qualifiers to where that erosion of the bank came from, so
So the
it's a
water-
confusing sentence, we apologize. But it was the
Water
erosion of the
overflowed,
bank.
That cut the bank, the cut brought the sediment.
Correct, so the bank is within the the Forest Hills Golf Club on the other side of that fence, but it was flow coming from the wetland from the south up and over.
Yeah.
I have a rookie question. And this is, I have no idea what we're talking about. I don't know what the reuse project is or why we're paying for repairs to it.
It's the golf course project, the Forest Hills Golf Course project.
A little bit more?
Shields Lake,
Shields Lake,
Shields Lake.
Okay.
part of the Shields Lake.
And so
$90 project.
we're collecting all that runoff into that pond and then running it through a pipe underground to their irrigation system. So we reworked their driving range area. So it's in this area that is the reuse system,
Okay.
the top of the reuse system. And where was the erosion at?
So I'm actually, it's not showing up on mine. So it'd be on the south end of the pond, right? Just no,
Yep.
Yep,
Right
right
there,
there.
okay.
That's where the manager Anderson, where the water came from that pond to the south. Right where the mouse is, that's where the bank eroded. And that's where the sediment came from. And now it's on the south end of our pond there.
Okay.
It was our project.
So it's cutting down on water volume and presumably pollution of some sort.
Well,
to
into
Shields
Shields.
Lake.
Mhm.
To Shields Lake, right.
Yep.
And also reducing the amount of water we take out of the aquifer to water the golf course.
26 million gallons.
Thank you.
Huge. Not just a little thing.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and we want to fix it so it doesn't do this next year.
Yeah, may if I could just add to that. So the reuse project itself is designed to remove about 77 pounds of phosphorus per year. And then we're doing that in conjunction. It was one big grant from Bowser with the alum treatment that's gonna happen this fall. And those two combined projects, if everything works as planned, will remove several hundred pounds a year from Forest Lake, which is a
Okay.
huge amount, so.
That's huge.
Thank you very much.
So the two scopes at this board meeting are part of that one larger Clean Water Fund grant.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm going to make the motion as presented. I'm not going to read it. And so that covers all the costs, it covers all the direction to staff and so forth.
right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, old business, 9A. We have a comprehensive data review.
Mr. President and managers, maybe just before we start on this final, first of the old business, but I would like to introduce our newest staff person here, Roxanne Robertson. So she comes to us from a local firm down the road, WSB, and but is a new, it's your grandparents' farm? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Yeah.
It's nice to meet you all. I'm sure I'll get to know you all more in the future. But I'm excited to work for the district. As Mike said, I'm coming from an engineering firm, WSB, who I think is doing a little bit of work for the district. I was an environmental scientist for them, and I have a background in biology and a master's in ecology. I bought, my husband and I bought 20 acres of my grandparents' old farm, which is located north of Forest Lake. And we will be moving up there once our house is renovated, probably this winter. So I'll be a local in the community, so I'll probably see you around and
Wonderful.
yeah,
Welcome.
thank you.
Nice to have you here. All right.
So I just thought it appropriate on the monitoring because that's one of our key program areas and that I've talked to Roxy about and so, but I know that she'll be cutting out here a little bit early this evening. So, but I wanted to make sure we did an introduction.
Thanks.
So. All right, Dr. Funky.
Vice President Managers, in the board packet was a memo. It's very similar in format to the memo I put together actually 2 years ago as part of the minor amendment update. So basically, I have a presentation. Okay, so Basically, what's new in this one is updated tables and figures with the addition of 2017 and 2018 data. So the last memo was through 2016. And then, of course, just analyzing the data and updating the conclusions and recommendations, of course, within the memo itself. But really, as you look through this, it might be helpful to kind of keep in mind how we intend to use it in the short term. So wanted you to be able to understand what the current data shows and kind of refresh your memory on current stream and lake trends, because as part of the watershed management plan, there will be discussions about how we want to update our comprehensive monitoring plan in the future, and I think this really helps give you data and to make those decisions. And then in the minor amendment, there were a couple lake associations that wanted to look at the revising the 2030 lake goals for some of the lakes that have already met those or are really close. I actually believe the memo for those lakes shows the data compared to what that lake goal change could be. So those are two items just to think about when you're looking at the data. You know, what data do we have? What is it telling us? How have we been using it? And then how might we change it as we go through that watershed management plan update? So Jessica, if you can go to the next. I'll just quickly go through. Oh, I'm in charge, right? Yeah. Thanks. She even put it right in front of me, so I wouldn't forget. Thank you. I did receive just a few questions and comments from Manager Anderson prior to, which were helpful, so I have the opportunity to clarify a little bit. Table 1 is my way to summarize just a lot of stream data. So it has all the locations on the left-hand side. They're grouped by management district, more or less. So starting at the top, you have your Bone Lake, Moody Lake, and it goes through the Little Comfort. Then we go into our Forest Lake Management District, and then at the bottom would be the Comfort Lake Management District, which would be the outlet of the whole system. And then just, a basic index of information we have. How many years of data do we collect, stream monitoring data? What was the full range of when that data was collected? And then just a snapshot of the range of data we saw. So the phosphorus flow weighted mean concentration in micrograms per liter. We had the total load for the year in pounds per year, the total annual flow in acre feet per year, and then the runoff depth is a similar way I like to think about flow, in that it looks at the total flow distributed over the whole watershed, the drainage area to that monitoring station. So the higher inches just means relative to the size of that drainage area, it had more runoff compared to another drainage area that would be of the same size. So there's two columns where I kind of give some sort of rating to help interpret, is this good? Is this bad? What does this mean? And what I failed to include was a key. So here's a key of what those mean. So in the phosphorus flow weighted mean concentration rating, when I say low, it's any value. Most of the data is less than 100 micrograms per liter. That's been our target for a lot of streams in the diagnostics. That's the ecoregion stream standard for phosphorus. So anything less than that, I would say, is below background levels. Not a big need for projects there. Moderate is when we're at 100 to 200 micrograms per liter, so we're just above those background levels. There's room for some improvement, but it's really when we get above the 200 micrograms per liter, we have high enough concentrations where projects could be targeted there and have good effectiveness. So that's one way to look at it. So, we're looking for areas where there's moderate to high flow weighted mean concentrations for projects, but then it also matters how much variability we have in the total load and flow. The rating actually, I was looking back, I say load and flow variability, but the actual rating is based on just the difference between the maximum and minimum load. So, what's the ratio between the maximum load we measured versus the minimum? In terms of putting practices in place, having a site with really high variability would be harder to design for and get consistent project effectiveness compared to a really low variable site. So a low variable site really is, your maximum might be about double the minimum. And up to, some of our highly variable sites, it might be an order of magnitude different, so 10 times greater or more. And that is to be expected in a lot of cases. Stream monitoring is very dependent on the flow conditions you have from year to year. It's a little less stable, if you will, than just lake monitoring. So, looking through the table, you might notice, for example, Himes Lake drainage near the bottom, which is that's the site that drains into the proposed tax forfeit project. It has moderate to high flow rate amine concentrations, which is good for targeting projects, and also low variability in the total load. So that lends to why we've been looking at that site for implementation. You can see in the lake outlet sites, we consistently, of course, have low flow rate amine concentrations, except for Shields Lake, but that is just an indication of the concentration of the lake. But we usually see really high variability in the flow, just what the lake's discharge, since it has an outlet. So this is all the data we have, and then there's tables at the back of the memo that basically inventory for every station what data we had and the value every year. And you can kind of look at that just to see, which years did we monitor a lot of sites, which had a few, to help compare among the data.
Could you explain again what the comparative is here? It's to others within that same sub-watershed or the entire watershed?
The rankings are just based on a value, so it's within the site itself. So you could compare
Okay.
across all the stations. Yep.
Okay. So it's that particular one only?
Correct.
All right.
Yep. So for Bone Lake North Inlet, the flow rate amine concentration rating is based on the fact that it has moderate to high flow rate amine concentrations, and that's just based on its data.
And this high variability of total phosphorus FWMC is the basis for your recommendation to maybe reallocate funds.
I'll get to that. I do want to clarify what that means. Actually, I'm right there. Thank you for the transition.
Very
So,
important transition. I like to save money.
So my recommendation was, when we start talking about how we want to allocate funds to stream monitoring, it's maybe half of the total monitoring budget. We have been monitoring at 6 legacy sites, and this is a conversation that we need to have in more depth with in those small work groups. So I just want to mention just some thoughts is what we have been using data for in the district for grant applications and to assess, loads to lakes and how to make improvements is really when we go within each lake management district and look at those tributary monitoring sites within 1 year and look for those hot spots. Within each of those diagnostic studies, we've identified some high-loading tributaries. So there does seem to be a need to kind of shift around where we're doing monitoring more and on effectiveness monitoring phase now that we are through some implementation. So for example, in the Bone Lake Management District, I thought an example might be helpful. My memo was pretty brief. We have the wetland rehabilitation project, so having a station at that Moody Wetland C site to keep an eye in the future of the effectiveness of that project. We had that field that was converted from row crop to perennials, Melanie Trail, and then we have the drain wetland restoration projects being implemented in that Meadowbrook Avenue. So moving forward, trying to maybe rethink how we're doing our monitoring to be a little more effectiveness focused than just getting a baseline. So that was what that recommendation meant. So there may be some sites that we decide to shift somewhere else and have a different focus. That will be more useful for grant applications and then as part of adaptive management, refocusing efforts for implementation. And then also along with that, this coincides with the vision for monitoring. Mike Kinney's been helping make this toolbox with Iowa Rodeo, with these remote logger stations, having volunteers and district staff all coordinate to expand that breadth of that monitoring. Does that answer your question, Manager Schmaltz, on that?
Yeah, I think your statement on the trends in stream water quality really summarizes why we have to maybe shift the money, and the variability is too high. I mean, there's other things going on that we're not measuring, so what we are measuring isn't very useful. Because the other variability dominates what we're trying to get at, right?
Correct. What I found is just, this is how we have used it, just the The widespread monitoring over a long term, we haven't gone back to that data. It was just those 6 sites. What we have been going back to for grant applications is those targeted tributary monitoring sites. So within a lake district, we have select sites.
During the diagnostic study phase.
Corrected.
Is what you're saying, and how critical that is.
Right,
You
and how
know-
what the good payback is on it.
Well, of course, but I guess my question here is that we don't make this determination of where to monitor on our own. You know, this is driven by you, not you personally, but EOR, our engineers, and also Washington Conservation District. So if this has been needing to be updated, then that's the direction that we must get from our qualified engineering staff and technical staff people. So when you say for your decision-making, we're not going to be able to do that without your guidance.
And I will have recommendations. You're absolutely right. I do think this is a really big discussion, so I don't want to get too far into it, but it's kind of maybe a sneak peek of some of the suggestions that I will make, and we can talk about that in more detail and what it means and where it would be in terms of
Well,
budget.
I think we should have a workshop. This is so critical. It's the foundation of everything we do. So I appreciate you bringing it to us, but we can't work in isolation, that's for sure.
But I think we've had, at least I had a sense of this way back when I started complaining 3 years ago about it. And so it's nice to have it quantified and finally put on a piece of paper that there's other things going on here that we can't measure. So we could get on to doing better things, hopefully.
Well, and that's the point, I guess. We're all saying the same thing in our own way, but that's the same thing. I kept hearing about, the board making this decision, but we have to rely on our technical experts to guide that.
Right.
It's not something that we can do alone. I'm still flummoxed by how we can have areas that have just such a tremendous amount of flow variability, and the total phosphorus loads are enormous, and yet it's coming out with low ratings. So that definitely needs more discussion. And we can't do it at a board meeting, but I think this topic has to be in a workshop.
And I'll just clarify, I think I said I'll have recommendations, but this is actually a conversation I've had in conjunction with Mike Kinney and other district staff. There's been, I think we've mentioned a few meetings that we've had. Mike Kinney invited Kurt Sparks in to talk about monitoring. So it's something that has been an effort that's been ongoing.
Future of updating our monitoring program, basically. This is the beginning of the data we'll base that on.
But even the trends, some of these we know, on page 5, we've got stabilization or improving in most areas except Comfort and Little Comfort in the SECI readings. So what's going on there? Do we know? That's a rhetorical question tonight, but something that needs to be answered in the future. And then, as you said on pages 6 and 7, when you've got districts asking, or lake associations asking for lower targets for 2030 and 2040 goals, we need to look at all of them and see where they should be. But this is one of the questions I asked Megan is, in the deep core samples that we have, what can that tell us about what, especially Comfort had one, what is
That's our target.
the pre-settlement phosphorus target?
Yeah. That's why
That
we
was
did
the
it.
one piece I forgot to follow up on for this meeting. But yes, that will be part of the discussion. We'll bring in the core data, look at the long-term records. Yes, I apologize. Mike?
Well, they were in the tour packet, all that information, and it's also available on our website, all of those reports from all of the St. Croix Watershed Research Station.
The paleo
Correct.
records for that?
So-
Okay, I have them with me.
Right, and it's, was one of the principal reasons for, why I recommended developing those, is to make sure our targets were reflective of the science that was capable of these systems.
Yeah.
Also, just note in Megan's slide, or the very last piece there about the Iowa Rodeo and remote monitoring stations. I think this has been, again, an adaptive management process, and as we look forward to the 10-year plan and renewing our monitoring plan also on a next 10-year basis, this is really a natural process for improvement.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, can we schedule a workshop then in the spring so that we can early spring, get our monitoring?
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if
Schedule
you have
set.
thoughts on timeline?
Well, we may have a special meeting coming up in October 17th, I believe. Whether or not we would have enough things ready for that, I don't know. But
At some
we
point,
could
before
still-
we sign our next monitoring contract, I think we need to visit this.
And it could be over a couple different meetings too. It doesn't have to be all at once. Maybe next one is just more background information and the next.
Right. Yep, give us what we need to make sure we're making the right choices.
I don't see it.
So I'll just continue with just on the lake monitoring side. I was just looking through kind of with this, how we might update the monitoring plan in mind. We have district goals, and I was noticing that actually we don't always regularly monitor some of the lakes that we do put 5-year district goals. So, we got to make sure we have data within those 5-year windows to make sure we're meeting them if we have a goal. And if we aren't, for example, Himes Lake, it has a goal, but we monitored a couple years. It's really high quality and have chosen not to keep monitoring intensively. It's not susceptible to change. So that's one where, do we need the district goal, or we just have a note about once every 5 years? How would the district manage that, for example? And then, the lakes that are currently on the impaired waters list, at the state, they work through delisting based on having at least 2 years or 2 years of data every 10 years. So there might be a few lakes that we don't often think about, but are technically on the impaired waters list, like Second Lake. So when we're looking through how many years and how often to monitor lakes, that would come into play. And then there's other ways we monitor lakes beyond just the surface water, and particularly now that we have invested in these alum treatments in Moody and Shields Lake, doing regular bottom water, phosphorus monitoring of the concentration in those bottom waters, just to have a check on, are we seeing any increases in the concentration? And I think maybe at the last meeting, discussed how in Moody Lake, it's been almost less than 40 parts per billion through the 2019 growing season, which is a really strong indicator that the alum treatment is
Locked everything.
correct, is effective. Mhm.
Not throwing a bunch of new stuff in on top of it,
Correct.
most likely.
Oh, well, that would maybe be indicated in the surface water concentration.
Oh.
The bottom water really gives a sense of that
It isn't
internal
escaping
loading. Correct.
from the bottom, okay.
When the lake is stratified, do we see any buildup
Gotcha.
over the growing season? So, but again, we'll go launch even deeper into those discussions in a workshop or whatever we decide.
Okay.
That's all I have, if there's no further questions.
I just had one question on your summer average phosphorus nutrient chart with all the historical data. Our lake data is actually being monitored by the Washington County WCD, right? They're taking samples. So I was wondering why, if you go to Forest Lake West has got constant data for like 25 years. But that's really not volunteer data. They actually use the sampling from Water Conservation Department, right? So why are we missing data on Middle and East? If it's been done if it's supposed to have been done by the Washington Conservation Department. I always thought this data was actually our data, the volunteer data, but then I find out that they don't even use our data. It's just kind of a backup exercise for them, which is kind of frustrating, but considering the amount of time we put on it. But if that's the case, then why don't we have data from the early 2000s?
Well, I know that Dr. Funky and I have talked about this, and that's why I asked Kurt Sparks to come in. He was one of the individual instrumental in developing really the monitoring program at the MPCA decades ago. And so he was definitely interested in having a conversation with the Conservation District because they have suggested well, they haven't suggested, they've just flat out stated that the technique is different, that, so it's not statistically valid. And of course, Mr. Sparks is very much in disagreement with that suggestion, that, that, well, let's sit down and look at it. So he felt that the correlation between the volunteer monitoring data and data that the Conservation District was in fact statistically valid, and then that we should be able to use it. So,
Well, one of the biggest variables is we don't go out on the same day. You know, if you've got a week to 10 days, you usually have a week to sample. You know, if you sample on a day after a storm and somebody else samples 7 days later when it's been perfectly calm and no inflow to the lake, there's going to be a big difference in those readings. So that's where the greatest variability, in my opinion, is, having done this since 2004.
but I think to his point though, is that still, when you look across the spectrum of time, that even if there is days or a week in between the sampling periods, the mixing and everything within the lake is not so great that the numbers would not correlate close enough to be considered valid.
Okay. But then why are we missing data? Because they felt it wasn't reliable, or they just didn't do the sampling that year?
Oh, that the Conservation
know.
District did?
Excuse me?
You're asking if the Conservation District did it? Well, I think what they would tell you was that the district didn't fund it.
In these
Interesting.
basins.
Correct, as I understand it from the previous presentations, that there were years where the district opted to fund certain activities and not with the long-term monitoring.
Remember that?
I remember we did do some,
We're working on, under D.
Yeah, we were still under D,
$250,000 to work with every year,
yeah,
and that doesn't give you a lot of money
we had to
do
pick and
things.
choose our sampling sites.
Yeah, and they were moving around. They would
Yeah.
recommend moving it from one site to another site, and so you lose all that consistency.
Right.
And,
Okay.
But I think Manager Schmaltz, to your point though, is that I think we could go back and pull the volunteer monitoring data into
And
a,
use that. That's-
Right.
I wasn't implying that, but it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I like the idea. We should go look and see if it's available.
Washington County just chose not to do it because they didn't trust it. Is that
Right.
what I'm hearing?
Yeah, they didn't think it was statistically significant.
well, they just, that's not necessarily their rationale. They just, the technique was different, that they
Technique
felt
was
it wasn't done by professionals.
So apples and apples didn't compare.
Right, but they were not looking at it from a statistical standpoint.
For simplicity, this is based on the WCD records of the growing season average
Oh.
data,
Right, right.
but you're right.
And it may not make any difference.
there's
We got
more.
now, what, 10 years of data on middle and east, so we probably have enough history to qualify for getting unimpaired and so forth, so.
And I-
It's probably a moot point, but it's just kind of irritating to see that, that's
Yeah,
all.
I do think, actually, I'm just thinking back, because some of these lakes predate, of course, when they would have been monitoring by a long time. So I think they did include the historic record in their long-term records, and then, but probably starting when they consistently monitored all the lakes, it's just their growing season average and not the camp.
Well, they were part of the WMO though before, so a lot of
So
the
that also was
information on
them in the
Forest
80s?
Lake- Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. They were on for 20 years, probably 70s.
And did the monitoring as well. History, I don't know.
Okay, that's
Okay, anything else on the comprehensive data review? Any other questions
work
for Megan?
again. I think
To
you did great
come,
work.
more to come.
More to come, yes.
More to come.
Workshops and things coming. so-
Yeah, and I think you did great work. We're
Yep.
going to maybe change some things, so it's time well spent. Thank you.
All right, then we have a water management plan update. Talk about the small group meetings.
President Managers, yes, we discussed it, the board liked the idea. So we just picked a variety of dates that we thought would be plausible within the early, I guess, winter timeframe. I tried to stay away from October entirely, and even November may not work if we're trying to get some local farmers involved in some of these, just due to potential harvest conflicts. So at the same time, we noted that we may do a meeting in early January in addition for sort of one last one, but.
I just have a comment about these times. I just think if we're asking the public to come, 4 o'clock in the afternoon is too early. And, you know, I think the earliest should be 6:30. That allows people to get home from work and grab a bite to eat. And then we keep it to 9.
Right, I added this piece here that any one of these aforementioned dates could be adjusted to a later start time. So we just not to try to lock in at least something for meeting rooms in places, so. But we thought there could be some mixing and matching, and I agree that,
And Saturday mornings have been successful in the past for comprehensive plan reviews at local levels. So I would also offer a Saturday morning, if possible,
Okay.
so that you can get people from, you know, that don't have time during the week but want to participate.
You know, the other thing is, I think this is similar to what the city did here recently, where they had a series of workshops for inviting small groups to come in. And I attended, and I think Jerry did, and a couple other people from the Lake Association, but they had a facilitator there. And by the way, they held it to an hour and a half, 6:30 to 8, when we were done at 8. So I think an hour and a half should be plenty of time, but this facilitator really got a lot out of the group in an hour and a half. So I don't know whether we want to check into that company or not. I was impressed. And with how they managed a large group, we must have had 40 or 50 people there. And they put them in groups and we rotated, and boy, she was boom, 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 you know, and it moved right along. And we came out with some good rankings and everything, prioritizations. It was pretty impressive. So I just want to offer that as a suggestion. You might want to check into it. I think it's going to be similar to what we're trying to do here, but I'm not positive.
That's been my experience on school board initiatives and also planning at the city and county level. They do have specialists that come in, like Gallagher is for HR. There are companies that specialize in
Right.
comprehensive plans. So they do work magic, that's for sure.
I think it would be worth the extra money we might have to spend. I don't think it's going to be a lot of extra money, because somebody's going to have to facilitate it for us, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's EOR or somebody, but anyway, I was impressed with it, and I think it's something to look at.
okay. Well, certainly we can, I mean, that was I guess the point of the memo was to get input, just like this, times.
Yeah.
And anything else, so we can work on those, and we'll look at a potential Saturday, you know, whether or not, trying to see what day should be the Thanksgiving would be the third Thursday, the 21st. So we probably want to stay away from the 17th. Wait, is that correct?
Can you do that one in January, the Saturday one, or is that too
Or
late?
maybe wrap up the whole thing on a Saturday in January.
Well, that's the
Sure.
last public one.
Yep.
Right,
This
okay,
is
yeah,
holiday
that might be
season.
better.
Right.
Nobody's going to come in on a Saturday, maybe not even during.
Well, maybe we'll try to do, you know, a couple during November and then a couple in January.
Yeah.
Well, November's still, I mean, as long as you stay, I mean, Thanksgiving weekend is what, 7 days after the 14th, so you're actually ahead of the weekend before Thanksgiving. So if you did 6th and 12th or 13th, I think you might be okay, but, because people aren't going to start traveling till that weekend.
Yeah, but there's a lot that goes on.
Anyway.
Jessica, when's our November meeting is on the 14th?
No, it's the 19th.
Oh, that's right, we moved it to a Tuesday.
I'm going to be gone again.
I like the idea of the two now, November, and 2 in January. I think that's good spacing. It's after the holiday season. That would be good. Also, that money that's available from Bowser for planning purposes, we could probably tap into that for this facilitator.
We can ask.
Good idea.
the 28th Thanksgiving this year?
Is it the
I
4th?
think it's later.
It's 20,
It's the,
you're right, it's the 28th, yeah.
So the board meeting is the 21st. At least that's when I'm coming according to my calendar.
yeah, the 28th is Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, and then we have a scope of work to approve for Phase 2 on the water management plan.
Correct.
Mr. President, managers, this just covers UR's involvement to assist district staff with the update. Emily and I and Mike sat down really at the beginning of the planning process, and I had outlined what our involvement would be at that time. The first scope was just through essentially that draft outline. I just wanted to break it up into 2 chunks in case that in the initial stage, we changed our mind on what it might look like, but the vision looks similar. So this is that scope of work that we put together. It just gets us through the rest of revising the complete draft. So things that UR will be assisting with are, we will help in more detail with the implementation activities to achieve those lake goals over the next 10 years, where the projects are, what the cost is, the schedule over those 10 years. We'll help update those lake data tables and summary sheets, and then, any key maps that might need some updating.
Okay.
It goes to say that you're providing input as we go along with things we should be considering in the future.
Correct, yes. Also within this, these are some of those larger tasks, but there's time for us to attend meetings and be involved in
You're just not
workshops.
reacting to what's been, well, of course, you're putting it together, so in many cases, so those ideas should flow out if you have thoughts, right?
Correct, yes, we would definitely share, we are working on the planning process with district staff, so if we have ideas for what the vision might look like, yes, we're involved in those meetings as well. Mhm.
I'll make the motion as presented.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right. Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have money to update the plan. All right. Workload analysis and visioning discussion. Mike.
Mr. President, managers, so with regard to the Bowser PREP funds, which is the Performance Review and Assessment Program. So we've gone through the performance review portion of it previously, and one of the things that the Board of Water and Soil Resources, Bowser staff, came up with is the district working through some of the workload capacity issues. And as we look at our watershed management plan update, then this is an item that we would want to pursue further. As such, then we kind of asked around a little bit. There are a variety of firms that could do this work, and felt that it was really it was important to get some board members to participate in the review of the qualifications of any such firms, and so we came up with this RFP. One thing before it goes out, I think we would change that any questions regarding the RFP would be directed to me. The wording was not as I was thinking that if people had questions about the specifics of the administrative portion sort of the process, you could talk to Emily, but I'll just change it so it's all to me then, because chances are they're going to ask what are we after?
Right.
Piece, so. But other than that, we've laid out a timeline. Emily worked out here in terms of what we thought was appropriate, and then still get going, because come the end of November will be 3 years till we're ready to move out of or at least the end of our current lease, so.
Right. Yes.
I had some concerns. You're going to rewrite this document, right? There's just a couple of typos in there that need to
Yes.
be corrected, but the big thing was the time frame. This is a pretty big deal, and we're allowing 1 day, honestly, for turnaround of, I mean, the deadline for asking questions is the 7th. The release is the 27th, so that only gives about a week for people to notice it, formulate questions, and then get them to us. And then Emily, let's say they all come in on the 7th at 4 PM. And so we're really going to have that turned around in a day. I don't think that's realistic. And then the time frame again for putting together a proposal is so short. That also is a week, roughly. Well, actually, it's even shorter than that from the end of the question period. So
day.
what I've done is I've just created a timeline that gives more time for proposals. We want them to be good. We want firms to spend time putting together good proposals. And we end up on on 10/31, but we allow more time for them to actually get their proposals to us. So I can run through them quickly, but the 10/7 deadline, that would move to 10/10. 10/8 would move to 10/11. The 10/9 would move to the 21st. The 10/10 would move to the 24th. The 10/17 would be 10/29. And 10/18 would be 10/30. 10/31 is the same. So we still accomplish it in that period, but we allow more, like I said, more time for companies to do a good job with their proposals and not rush them. So I was concerned about that. And some people might not even see it. I don't know where you're going to release this, but, you know, if it's going to go in specialty publications or websites, they might not look at it every day. And that time period for even noticing it is so short. So it's something to consider. I'm just concerned about that.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess we were feeling a little bit compressed by where we wanted to be with our watershed management plan at the same time. So this is strictly a suggestion. We can certainly back it out on the end as well, to whatever the board feels is appropriate. We have done some research. I mean, I've gone out to all the administrators to see who has done something similar. So we have a list, partial list at least, of who we would maybe send this to, but it certainly doesn't mean that we've captured everybody in there. I think also I am cautious about, maybe two things, and I'd be happy to take some input on this. Whether we want somebody that's really knowledgeable about watershed districts, or maybe more a firm or an entity or person that would be able to push the board more, and maybe the relevant knowledge of what a watershed district is, maybe being less of a factor. So I would feel that there are some out there that would just parrot what the board would be saying, and I'm not sure that's very useful in terms of trying to be forward-thinking. But.
Yeah. Are they going to interview us, or, I mean, I would suspect that they'd be looking at this, looking at our 10-year plan, and et cetera, and then working from that. But we'll have, because we want them to tell us what they think, right? So if they're interviewing us and feeding back what we've said, that's not very helpful.
Correct.
So, we've already agreed, we don't really have a lot of confidence in getting this thing done by the board itself. So we need some outside stimulation there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked at some of the final reports coming in? I was going to ask you that question, Mike. I know you've talked to some of the other administrators, but have you seen what they submitted back and kind of thumb through it and see what kind of stuff they provide?
I have not, and I could ask for those.
It might be, I know sometimes that's confidential information, but if you could look at, maybe go down in the office and just look at it or something, it might give you a feel for what we might expect to see and whether that's going to help us or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a suggestion, I guess, but
I like the suggestion about pushing the timeline out a little bit. I think
Yeah,
it's,
so do I.
I think we're gonna want good results from this RFP. We just don't want somebody to throw something at us real quick, and we're gonna have to make a decision based on what we get back in the RFPs to get down to the 3 firms and then to interview those 3, so.
Right, and if you want somebody outlying that hasn't done this before for watersheds,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to give them some more time to get their proposal together.
Why would we do that? Why would we go outside of our watershed experts?
Well, because I think Mike maybe had a point there. It'd be interesting to see what they come back with.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily rule them out. I mean, I think it's more about our visioning and the way we look at our future, and it may not be so much that they need to understand watersheds as much as they need to understand organizations.
But our comp plan has to be based on science.
That's
you know,
fine.
And so there's no getting around that.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't
So
think we
you
would.
have to have a background in this in order to be valuable. Otherwise, you know, we're gonna,
Well, they can
like
ask,
that.
they can ask really good questions, use our knowledge
Yeah.
for us by asking good questions. And so I don't think you have to be an expert in the area, because our plan defines where we want to go. We've got an organizational structure, we got certain standard activities we do, monitoring, you know, all this kind of stuff, and we got existing projects like on phosphorus removal. So if we get those done, we're gonna have to move to maybe, you know, what do they call it, groundwater efforts.
Or
So how
sediment
fast
load,
how
or
fast are we gonna shift to those
nitrogen,
future
yeah.
things we're ignoring right now?
Right.
So that's kind of what they have to do for us, and so it's all in the plan. It's a question of how fast we move forward on those things, I guess.
But even more reason
Yeah.
that they should have a science background is my point, you know. It's not just about us saying what we want to do, but we have to be
Right, okay.
scientific about it. It's statute.
Well, I think in the end, it's up to us, right? I mean, we're the ones who, so I think if you throw the net wide enough, we get a lot of RFPs in, we look at them, we pick the ones that look interesting to us. Out of those, we ought to be able to come up with 3 that make sense.
Right.
And if they're not, you know, I don't know what we're gonna see. If we see the same old, that's not really gonna help us. We need somebody who thinks differently than we've gotten into our way of thinking. I want someone to push us out of that.
Well,
I
Okay.
don't mean to put us out on some other planet where we don't know what we're doing. We're gonna stick to the science, we know that. That's always been our background.
yeah.
But someone else can help us make sure we're looking in the dark corners and so that we're not missing anything, so.
I think, you know, we've got a pool of engineers. I would hope that we would send the RFP out to all of them at a minimum.
My read of this wasn't that we were looking for an engineer, but that's fine. I mean, I think that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, that wasn't my view of it, but I'm willing to look at whoever wants to respond to the RFP. Let's get as many as we can. And even more reason for giving more time, I think, because we may have a lot of questions coming in, so.
Our current plan is based on the scientific reports that were done in the first 10 years. So there's a lot of good information in there that can be updated and revisited. We don't have to start from scratch. We shouldn't start from scratch. Because our current plan was an outgrowth of all of those prior reports. But I agree, looking at our data that we've started doing here, taking that water monitoring that's been done by the Washington Conservation Service 2 years ago and asking EOR to make sense of it for us and to put that over time so that we can actually understand what's happening, what the trends are, that's a really important foundation for moving forward. But as was brought up here, there's other things besides phosphorus, and as we tame that beast, then we have to move on to the others. Sediment load is a big deal, and nitrogen hasn't come up too often, but we have chlorophyll problems. We have chlorophyll A problems. We have other things that are impairing some of our water bodies, mercury, for example.
Yep, lots of.
If we can use Claros to do that, those kinds of things.
Right.
Chloride hasn't come up that often, but You know, that's something, especially where we have highways that are right next to roads, or excuse me, to our lakes. And we've got a number of those.
Yep.
Mr. President, managers, based on the discussion, I guess I would maybe even think about pushing this a little bit farther. One of the things that my observation is that the board has historically and continues to operate and in a way different than other watershed district organizations. So, and I think that's really the challenge is how do we then find somebody to help us, move forward into again, an area of the unknown. So I guess I do think it's a very, very important process. And based on this discussion, I guess I wouldn't mind a little bit more time thinking about and researching some of the entities that we might want to engage for the RFP. So then assuring a little bit more time for them to review and submit would be important. So,
That's fine. I mean, as you said, we don't have to get it done on this timeline. We have to get it done on a timeline that supports our work. Sorry. Okay. So you're gonna go back and look at this again and maybe bring it back to us at the next meeting?
well, I guess I might not want to wait till another month because we're now
Right.
wait to the end of October, but if two managers would want to volunteer as a work group and then with that direction and then work together to get something released at the timeline that
The
seems
board has
appropriate.
any ideas about how this might move forward or checking questions that we should ask, maybe we should send them to Mike. I think I'm going to put rough together a format just to send it to you and see what you think of it, so.
I'd like to be involved in discussions going forward, so. Does anyone else want to do it?
I certainly can.
Okay.
So what's our recommended action?
We're going to work with Mike as a small work group to revise this and try to come up with a RFP update. And sounds like Steve's going to send in some.
Yeah, I have an idea how, if I were going to do this project, how I would do it, so I'll put together an outline, send it to you, Mike.
Can we confirm that we'll send it out prior to the next meeting though?
Yeah, the RFP?
Correct.
Yes. I mean, once we come up with the schedule, then we'll execute on that schedule.
Okay.
It's no difference than doing it for a business, except that it's more constrained because you're not going to be acquiring people or looking into moving into a different planet, as John said, which often happens in business when you're forced to.
I'm hoping
Otherwise,
we're not.
it's just projecting our business out, and it's probably more defined than most businesses, so. It shouldn't be that difficult.
We're okay with executing on that plan, Chuck? That the board concurs that the work group can go forward and work with Mike?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess my understanding without a formal action is simply that the board is comfortable with the administrator sending out an RFP when it's completed, and he'll be consulting with two managers as he finalizes that, and Manager Schmaltz and others may independently provide some input just to Mike, but not involving any discussion among the managers.
Right. It would be input directed at Mike for the process
Right.
of developing that RFP and the process itself.
Right.
And that,
So that's okay.
all right. So we'll go forward on that basis. Okay? And we have item 9D that we added, the one watershed, one plan discussion. Manager Anderson.
Yeah, the point where it's at is, we'll do this together, Steve and I, but is deciding the framework of the entity that's going to move forward. And, yeah.
I'm going to show them that or something else.
There's different entities. Basically, it's like joint powers agreements. You can be a separate entity like we are. You'd be kind of a hybrid of that. And I don't know that there's a feeling yet for what other people are thinking. I've heard side conversations with Fran Miron, and he's talking to different people and so on, but it sounds, and I think he brought this up at the last meeting as well to everybody, but he's looking at it more as a joint powers board, like the sewer and some of the other things that he's involved with at the county operates. So, anyway, I think the board needs to weigh in on this. It was brought up about 2 months ago. We had a presentation packet that everybody got
Right.
outlining those. Mhm.
One of the things that Mike and I have talked about is to try to utilize people and organizations that already exist. And you've got two today that work in the Lower St. Croix. You've got the St. Croix Research Lab, which we've used, and they have done the TMDL, but they're, as Mike mentioned, they're more researchers than that. They're not necessarily project people. And then we've got what's the other organization called, Mike? The Friends of the St. Croix or something like that?
St. Croix River Association.
St. Croix River Association, and they're very good at fundraising, and they've sponsored and got a lot of projects done. So somehow, how could we use those people or those organizations with maybe adding one person or an engineering firm and working within that kind of structure some way, and maybe adding a specialized board just to work on projects, 3 or 4 people that would vote on which project would get done and so forth based upon what the recommendations were. But rather than trying to create a whole new organization, but I don't know whether did you get any feedback? I saw the letter coming back from the St. Croix Research Center. It doesn't sound like they have a strong appetite of working on projects, from what I interpreted, or have you heard more from him?
No, I haven't, but I think that what they do have a strong background in, of course, is the science. And I'm not saying that it's missing from the entire process, but it's not I wouldn't consider it a focal point.
Right.
That when we do look at the other One Watershed, One Plan documents that have been approved, all the others have done this sort of cooperative framework, meaning that the entities within those particular counties, and the majority of them then falling within the SWCDs, are each taking a piece of all of it and doing something. But when we look at the way that we function in terms of the prioritized, targeted, and measurable, and then you look at the other One Watershed, One plans that have been approved and now getting funding, they do not at all look the same. That those are drastically different from the standpoint that it's kind of getting money out, and they have a very long laundry list of things to do, and there's not really much, if any, cost-benefit analysis. I mean, there's some, they will do SWAs, I'll acknowledge that, but there's not much interest at all in doing diagnostic monitoring or doing some additional analysis of the water body of concern that we've done, let alone, some other things that are now out there. I mean, so I think that we do have the opportunity within the Lower St. Croix, both using some Arduino technology and other things, to implement a full-scale diagnostic work if they wanted to and get more focus. Because mathematically at this point, we would never have enough money, anything close to enough money, to make any measurable difference in water quality by the time the Clean Water Fund, the legacy money, is done. So that's just a reality that people really need to deal with. But at present, I don't see that being addressed.
My feeling is that it should be a joint powers board like the Red River Board. That's a very effective unit. We learned more about that on the summer tour, but I was very impressed by that and how it functions. I also think that we need to move to a proportional representation on that board based on the area that's involved in the Lower St. Croix. Chisago County is the majority of it. And we've got 3 counties that have 5% or 7% at the top of their land area that's part of this. They should not have the same representation as Chisago and Washington. Washington's really only the upper portion of Washington County. It's the northern part. So not all of that. I heard those comments after the meeting that you and I were at, John, at the courthouse and in Stillwater. And so, I think there's people that are on the fringes are not as excited about this possibility. But if we're going to clean up the St. Croix, then I think we have to do something that's much more focused on the organizational side. And we have some really good foundational documents, reports that have been done, where we can start and get very, very focused on where we need to start doing more monitoring and do projects. So I think that can happen, but it has to happen with the right structure and the right composition of input. And yeah, I've pretty much mapped this out in my mind already, so I'm ready to go. And my next thing is to talk to Ben about buying into this, because it's not going to happen the way it is now. It's too loosey-goosey, and people that have 5% of the area are
Equal partners.
yeah, at least a third of the voice in the room, and that's not good. And the organizations that don't have a watershed district mindset are the ones that have the majority of the membership right now. So we're not going to get to where the state or we want to be unless that changes.
So I guess the question I would have is, the name of the thing is One Watershed, One Plan. We have watershed organizations in the state. Why isn't the organization modeled after a watershed district? What is the reason why we are not following the model we already have for watersheds?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Under the Joint Powers Board, you can.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to have enough buy-in for another distinct entity.
Right, that's the.
Right,
yeah,
because.
Not another layer of government.
Right.
And all that. But it really isn't, it's.
But also,
well, whatever.
if you've got contribution sources that are in Anoka County, do you want to pay for that through your taxes? Or should it be Anoka County?
Right.
And so you've got to have an organizational structure that holds people accountable. And can also, be the source for doing grants that are on that wider basis.
Right.
And loan programs, whatever it is that gets the job done and coordinates with each of those contribution sources, whether it's in Anoka or Pine or Isanti County or Chisago or Washington, There's all of that to deal with.
And proportional representation across the Joint Powers Board, so that there would be appropriate. It makes sense to me. I mean, I don't know what the downsides and the upsides are, but, and you said Fran was indicating his general leaning in that direction?
That's the conversations that I heard, him have with various people. The last one was on our tour
Okay.
at the bagel table.
So then the question would be, what's been?
With Angie, yeah. I think he told her to bring that to the next meeting on Monday. I'm not going to be there, so.
Yeah, you saw this, there was a Bowser letter in here on our packet. I don't think we're going to discuss it, but it's got the funding for next year, and the Lower St. Croix is going to get $471,000.
Well, I think the funding issues have always been the issue with watershed action.
But the ones that have been set up are getting $1.5 million now, so if you can, I think,
Get
bring
set
good
up.
programs ahead, you'll get the money. But in the meantime, we have to show some results to qualify to.
Sure.
get this.
Well, but I think the first thing we have to
yeah.
do is get a structure
No,
together
I
so
agree
that
with you.
we're functional.
Right.
And that's a good thing to point out, is that, that 400,000 is still get your organization together
Get
money.
together, yeah.
But once you have projects going on, then the state is very interested in funding those.
Sure. Okay.
And the Sunrise River is a 39% contributor to phosphorus in St. Croix. So it's the biggest contributor in this lower St. Croix area. So we need to show what we can do, and by doing that and being successful in a short period of time, I don't think it's going to take more than 10 years to do it, and maybe sooner.
So our position would be to try to influence them in the direction of a joint
I
powers structure.
I think, you mentioned it, we've mentioned it before tonight, but we've mentioned it before in the past. Bowser, the state wants this to function like a watershed district. And in order for that to happen, watershed districts, or people familiar with them, have to step up, and they have to be in the leadership position. I advocated for that a long time ago. We didn't have the staff for it, though. You know, Mike can only dance on 2 feet, so.
I don't know, I've never seen him dance, so I don't know.
So anyway,
Yeah.
the point is that if we want this to happen, instead of bemoaning where it is, let's take the lead, let's do it,
Yep.
and let's show it how it can be done. Let's get some good, solid work done, and then not just show results for the Lower St. Croix, but hopefully show other one watershed, one plan areas.
How to structure.
How you can actually get water cleaned up in a short period of time, relatively short period of time, by doing things the way we've always done them. And if that happens, and we can take these 1,000 lakes that we have that are impaired in Minnesota and turn that around, and then put in place the management practices in the other areas so that the other lakes don't get impaired, and the streams and the rivers and so on, then we've done good work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I assume we're supportive of that as a board. I certainly concur with that. Push it as far as you can.
Okay. Okay.
All right, anything else on the One Watershed, One Plan? All right, reports of staff. Mike?
I don't think there's anything specific. I mean, the staff has been out and about at a number of different events. Jessica working with Leela again, some of the other staff, and just went out the other day to Warner Nature Center to see some of our local fifth graders. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate. They've been working on that boardwalk there, a floating boardwalk on that bog for some number of years, and it just got funded a couple years ago, and now they're closing, so. We'll keep on top of it. I think they're still dedicated to that piece there, but I don't know. Maybe that's the home of a future Lower St. Croix Watershed District office or something, but, so.
That's a good idea.
I don't know if you've had a chance to meet another our seasonal technician, Trey Jonas. He left early because of, apparently their family dog was having issues, but we welcome him. He's been involved with our permitting program as well, so.
Okay.
Is that?
Trey.
Oh, yeah.
Who's here for a while? Yeah, Trey, there he is.
Boy, Jason is really, I have to say, what a personality, you know, for being out and involved with the public. He is really good.
Jessica, do you have one of those pictures from today that he was out at the tree farm?
What did you see him?
We had an open house on Monday, and the landowner came
His picture
and
was just up. He's the long hair guy.
walked in the door and was, who was in
No,
charge?
that's not him.
And was concerned about flooding based
Yeah.
on another development.
That's Ben Monska's uncle,
Is that who that is?
Mr. Mansmith, yeah.
Oh.
We bought our Christmas trees from him
Oh.
for many years. You know, speaking of that, I had sent an email about the ditch work that's going on the Highway 35, and it looks like all of those little tributaries that were coming from the wetlands underneath the freeway are now just filled in, and it looks like they're putting in some kind of maybe a truck stop or something going on there. So I was telling John about it at the open house and showing him on the map where this work was going on, and he wondered if that might not be what's causing that water to back up. I don't know when Mr. Mansmith was talking about it, but if it's recent, it could be something to do with
I
that.
think they had some trucks that are trying to clean out the culverts. So I think maybe the culverts are clean, or else
Mm-hmm.
they were blocking the water off on one side to be able to go in and do some work. So I don't know.
On the
They were
freeway?
working on both sides of the
Yes.
freeway on the same culvert.
Yeah,
It's quite involved, but, well, a couple things. First, the gentleman had been in touch a couple years ago about
Yeah.
the water backing up.
Okay.
And was wondering who was gonna come and clean out the ditches. So,
Gotcha.
But the other is that we know from doing the Bixby Park project, that's a number of those culverts that were put in back in, whenever the interstate was constructed, the sixties, are now underwater. So, just the hydrology has changed that much, and, you know, so they remain, and they're probably, you know, quite filled with sediment, and, you know, so they're probably trying to remedy that to some degree, maybe with, I don't think they're planning to
We had to
replace
build
any
a
of
new highway
those.
on top of it, huh?
So,
That'll fix it.
that's what it looks like. There's another lane that they're putting the bedding down for you.
Yeah.
An emergency lane or something. So those were
15 inches
old
of
culverts, Mike, from like agricultural tile? Is that what you said? No?
no, those were the culverts that were installed originally for the
For
highway.
35, okay.
Right, but they just had now is,
They're just underwater.
they're just underwater, the hydrology has changed that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose in theory, it's possible that maybe the road has sunk some too,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but
And just
whatever the
car damage,
combination of
cars
it.
being towed away.
But during the Bixby Park project, we had plenty of interaction with, with MinDOT on those pieces, and, so.
So they were out there repairing, not, or
I'd have to go back and look at the details of the permit.
Okay.
Jason has been going to the weekly meetings and inspections, so.
Jason Neighbor?
Nope.
Jason, oh, our
Jason,
Jason.
our-
Okay. Okay.
So we don't have any responsibility to that ditch that's causing the problem for the gentleman who came in, right?
Correct,
So-
right. It's on private land, it's a private conveyance.
His private land or someone else's private land?
Someone else's private land.
Oh, that'll make it fun. Okay.
He was just glad somebody came out and looked,
Okay.
you know, and met with them and talked about it, so.
Good,
Jason said he had a very nice visit with him. so.
good deal. All right. Any questions for Mike on the administrator report?
Just this first page, bottom here, the U of M Water Resources Conference on October 15th and 16th. You're presenting? What are you presenting?
The future of watershed management,
Ooh, interesting.
with the merger of diagnostic monitoring,
Uh-huh.
adaptive management, and economics.
Is this for watershed district administrators? I mean, who's the attendance?
No, it's the,
Yeah, is
yeah,
it?
it's very large. I think there's probably like, what are they at, 700 or more in attendance. It's water resource professionals of every variety.
Oh,
I mean, so Dr. Funky will be there,
Hmm?
and I know there's,
Is it for district managers or is it for the professional people?
It's everybody and anybody.
Oh, okay.
Anybody with an interest. The Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District does a lot of presentations and emceeing, so, the same goes for a lot of different consultants,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of students, there's a lot
Oh,
of,
okay.
there's a lot of consultants, there's watershed people, there's wetland people, there's floodplain people.
Wonderful.
a lot of cities, a lot of city
Okay.
engineers,
Okay.
and across the border, they come from,
Mhm.
you know, so there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
professional development credits that can be obtained for the
Wonderful.
engineers, so it draws a lot of engineers. A
Can
lot of
you-
University of Minnesota staff.
Okay. Can you get out to the Board of Managers what day and time you're going to be presenting?
Sure, it'll be Tuesday afternoon
Okay.
on that date, but there is a registration fee for attending, so.
Okay.
Is it
you can work
televised?
is it recorded and televised?
Well, it might be fun to go and sit in on yours, and maybe attend a few.
Well, absolutely,
Letters for
right.
that
We
day.
can send you the link and,
$275 for 2 days, I think.
right, and 200 for a day.
Oh, is it?
200 for a day
It's
and
expensive.
275 for both days.
Mhm.
A typical
This one's better.
It includes
It's 2
lunch.
lunches. There's a nice lunch.
Yeah,
Included.
that's what Mike just
And
said.
snacks.
It has a nice lunch.
It sounds like better presentations, though, than we see at MOD. You know, the MOD presentations.
There will be, some of those you will see at both conferences.
Okay.
So.
But there's many presentations, it sounds like.
Correct. In fact, I'm glad to see one of those that is in the same time slot at this one will also be presented at a different time slot at the MOD one, so. Cool.
So there's typically 4 tracks across
Okay.
the 2 days and different ballrooms, like they use the River Center, like they pretty much pack it.
Wow. Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, good. New technologies are
Yes.
displayed and shown. Oh, good, good.
Well, and you have several, right, that you're, several staff, I think? Is Paula presenting
I
separately?
believe so. I believe so. I'm sure Brett has a presentation.
Yeah.
I should know
I know,
this.
I
Don't
know
tell
Brett
him I
is,
don't.
Brett is presenting at the next consortium meeting on, is it the stormwater reuse?
Reuse,
Right.
correct? October 4th?
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, next
At
Wednesday.
Stillwater, Washington
Oh,
County.
October 2nd.
Correct, the second, yeah.
Anything else for Mike on the administrator's report? Nope. All right. You are.
I have just 2 items. One, those Enviro DIY lockers that we saw the one at Moody Lake Park. Actually, they're all deployed except that one because that's at the district office, but we have 11 out in the JD6 of Watershed just to test them. We have in the wetland wells a series of 5 in one of the transects near 97, and then just in the stream, see how they work. So they should be recording data online as we speak, I believe, so that's exciting.
Nice.
And then the last thing, there's been requests just to get an update in the Bone Lake outlet wetland project. We've had EOR staff and also now Blaine, now that he's on district staff, go out and meet with the Koi Pond landowner and look around. Just some of the more recent information they received from that landowner. We're kind of learning the story of that facility. So presently, the settling ponds that they used to use are mostly empty because a lot of their production has shifted out of state. So they have some within a higher end product that are inside buildings. So currently, there's no obvious discharge from the site or overflow, and we have water quality data after a couple rain events that confirms that at Lofton Avenue and Manning Avenue, and then at their field crossing near the outlet of the wetland. So it's been kind of fascinating to learn about a new industry, but that's what we know so
How
far.
long ago did that happen? Did they move?
Very recently.
Production?
Blaine thought she mentioned even within the last year or so.
Okay.
So he's going to follow up with them and talk about what their future plans are for that
Yeah.
facility, so
Good. Had there been
Yeah.
any improper discharging before that?
I think he will find that out, and I have to get him some information. We've tried to contact someone to track down the permit, but Blaine will help follow up on that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Megan? All right.
There's one thing, I'm sorry, John, on the, either Megan or Mike, on the administrative report, under 3009, Sunrise River Drained Wetland Restoration Tax Forfeit Properties, grant request of $492,000. What is that for?
Clean
That
Water
was
Fund
a
grant.
Clean Water Fund grant application.
Okay,
So it was
this is
one
for
of
a
2.
project for next year?
Yep, correct.
Okay, okay.
At the tax forfeit property.
Okay.
Property, excuse me.
Wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll see that in the work plan if we get it then, correct?
If we get the grant.
For 2020?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barton?
To my knowledge, no whistleblower complaints have been filed regarding President Spence and foreign leaders.
Uh-huh. I try not to talk to them if I can help it.
And no, I don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Treasurer's report?
Okay, we had income this month of $94,620.14. About 2/3 of that was our AWP loan disbursement number 2, so that's good. And as far as expenses this month, we have expenses of $194,568.21. I ask the board to approve payment of those expenses for the month.
And for those looking on their sheets, that doesn't match
That's
because
correct, yeah.
there was a $24,000 payment to who?
Dunaway.
Dunaway, for the Shields Lake Fish Barrier. That came in last month that we were late on, so we need to get it paid. That's why they don't match.
Right, thanks, John.
I will make a motion to approve the treasurer's report and pay the bills.
I'll second. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Report of officers and managers. Jim? Steve?
Just a quick comment. I attended the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research and Management Showcase from the University of Minnesota, and I would encourage board, if you have a chance to attend that, it's excellent. There's 6 presentation sessions during the day, and there's a total of 6 presentations given each 45 minutes. So day goes really fast. And the topics range anywhere from will property values cool as AIS heats up, looking at the cost value, to a great presentation on starry stonewort, and then just a lot of other good stuff. So if you have a chance to go next year, I would recommend you go. There's a lot on carp management this year, so that was a popular topic. And I think Garrett's not here, he was there, so he was able to go also to a lot of the presentations. So next year, I'll try to get a copy out to everybody ahead of time, maybe see what the topics are.
Nice.
That's it.
Jackie?
Yeah, I just have something that I want to bring to the board for consideration, and then also, we don't have to decide tonight, but the city of Wyoming is going through a comprehensive plan update. And so I spent some time reading that document, and I was very impressed with their park area. They have a natural, they call it a natural park, and the intent is to protect the natural environment. Wetlands are particularly mentioned. Grove trees, old grove trees, are there, and as well. But the intent isn't to do a park like you normally see, but to leave that as a nature park and then have kiosks and education and preserve what was there before people came. So as much as they can. And there's a lot of wetland area, of course, near the Sunrise. And so I just had a brief conversation with the administrator and the planning and zoning guy who I knew from Wyoming Township days. But, that's such a forward-thinking concept to put in a city's comprehensive plan. And so I asked if they would be interested in working with the district to help protect those areas. And just the beginning of a conversation to see if there was interest, and there is. And the next entity I would like to talk to is the county, and then have it be the 3 of us that go together, because we want to do that as well. Our way to treat water is to do it the natural way, so that we don't have the expense of big structures and maintenance, but let nature do what nature does. And so if we can work together to protect as much of that as we can before development comes in and fills it in or takes it all, I would like to get the board's okay to just pursue those conversations. It's all very early stage, and so nothing's really happening other than just to see if there's an interest. But I would like to pursue that because development's not going to stop unless we have another recession, and there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to do that. And there's one development near Comfort, for example. I was asked by some folks to go there. They couldn't be in town. And that development is setting aside the wetlands on that property for a natural park. And so that's perfect, perfect use of that beautiful ordinance and comp plan concept. And so there's more opportunity in that whole stretch of the Sunrise where there still is some natural area.
Right.
So anyway, if that's okay with everybody, I'll just keep doing that.
It seems well aligned with our goals.
Yes, it
so,
does.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Mr. President, managers, it does remind me that I just had received a email from the property owner, Don Stanky, who bought the Banta Farm, bought the 20 acres. I know it was a while, maybe I think last January since we talked about it. There were a few things to be worked out with the property in terms of its zoning and things. But I will look to bring sort of a refresher of where we were on that particular parcel to the next board meeting, just for some kind of discussion, and then get some feedback as to whether or not we would want a proposal from EOR to go any further on that. So.
Okay. Anything else, Jackie?
Nope.
Okay, nothing from me. All right, summary and approval of board direction. I know we added at least 2 items to the board direction. One was, Chuck, you probably have better notes than I do. I have no notes.
So, Mr. Chair, board members, I'll tell you what I have on my list and see if I missed anything. First one is for Garrett to add to the AIS update the lack of zebra mussel findings at Bone Lake. And then for Mr. Kinney to check with the MPCA, Forest Lake, and Chisago County about, specifically about the snow at the A1 site, and more generally about snow management for water quality purposes. And then in conjunction with the salary survey, Mr. Kinney will explore with other watershed districts the opportunity for combining resources and interests. The board would like a discussion regarding the district's monitoring program scheduled in a timely way for next year's monitoring plan. With respect to the WMP update, there were suggestions about how to arrange the community meetings, that they shouldn't be earlier than 6:30, also Saturday mornings, not longer than an hour and a half, having 2 of them in November and 2 in January, exploring a use of a facilitator and potentially Bowser planning money for the facilitator. And that is my list.
Anyone else? Do you remember anything else?
Great.
All right. Thanks, Chuck. All right, I believe that is all the business we have in front of us this evening.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.